Hi, it's Emily from Kidlit Book Love. I'm here to show you my March and April book finds and book purchases, my vintage and antiquarian children's literature. I actually have a whole stack of vintage children's annuals that I purchased over the last few months, and since I'm a little bit behind making my reviews, I'm going to just show you the non-annuals first, show you some of my goodies. And this is my absolute little treasure I wanted to share with you. This is a copy of Sir Walter Scott's Lady of the Lake, little tiny book. And it was an original printing from 1847. It's the world's tiniest book. It was extremely expensive. I think I spent over $100 on this. I found it at an antique bookstore on vacation in Texas quite a while back. And it was printed by David Bryce and Son. Not sure if you can see it. It actually has the tiniest actual images and drawings. A poem in 6 cantos. It is very hard to read for somebody that has reading difficulty with small text, but it's an absolute little treasure. Sort of, not necessarily children's literature, but it's a fantasy fairy tale concept, and I'm really, really a fan of Arthurian literature, so I wanted to share that. And I wanted to share with you Rollo in London. Here's another absolutely fabulous vintage book find. And Jacob Abbott this is by Jacob Abbott. There's a whole series of books. He did Rollo in London, Rollo in Paris, Rollo traveling everywhere, basically. And it was a series meant for little boys more than anything. And this was an absolutely beautiful edition of this book. It's the only Jacob Abbott that I have. And you can go to the Jacob Abbott website for Jacob Abbott fans and read more about all of his titles. So it's about a boy who travels around the world and various things happen. And this one is just in absolutely perfect condition. And I actually just like the look of it, so I bought it, whether or not I ever read it. And this one I bought because it's my mom's name, and it's called Kathleen's Desire. It is not a romance novel. It is about a little girl who has a fantasy and a dream, and about all of her wishes to have a different kind of a life. And it was printed in London. Also, this is an original first printing of a very short printing of books. Late 1800s, and fairly easy reading, no images at all, it's just a really cute little story about a little girl who, and I loved the cover, which is why I bought it, about a little girl who, and literature for children in this time period was really about teaching moral lessons. It was about teaching not to have too much want and too much desire and too much greed. So you see a lot of, and I already read it, you do see a lot of underlying themes of that in this, without a doubt. And I have Little Sophie's Sister by Sophie May, Little Prudy's Sister, Susie, by Sophie May. And Sophie May wrote a whole series of these books, which you can find on eBay. Very sort of Little Women style, and about a family of some sisters. And it was by M.A. Donahue and Company, printed in Chicago. This one is inscribed in the front. Very hard to read. To Alice, love, Cousin Jamie, December 25th, 1914. And the story is Christmas, holiday themed. So I read the first few chapters. So it's really cute. Very much reminding me of Little Women. Here's a really pretty, cute little book. This one you can't even see the title. Barely. It's called Little Fritz. And it's about a little German boy and girl. And I loved the art in this one. List Happy Home Stories for Girls, and it was 1871 by Henry Young and Company. And so it only has the image in the front. It doesn't have any throughout, but really charming, another vintage story. This one I actually got for free from someone. It's a beautiful animal story called Beautiful Joe by Marshall Saunders. And kind of old Yeller style. Not really happy at the end, but a sweet boy and his dog story, 1893, by the American Baptist Publication Society. Beautiful Joe. So I only buy antiquarian children's books, which at the time a lot of antiquarian children's books were the equivalent of what a lot of adults will read today. So I only buy the ones that are in really good condition, more for the collection, not for reading. And sometimes I do read them because I can read really quite quickly. So let's move on to this. I have a copy I found of my Child Life magazine. This one is 1936 from the Children's Own magazine. And the Children's Own magazine was very popular and ran in the 1920s and 1930s. Geared towards children, it had short stories, illustrations, but there was a lot of advertising for parents in it with food products. Heinz vegetable soup. It tells you how long that's been around. And it was just fun. It was really neat to look at. It had some beautiful painting reproductions. This one had some great Halloween stories in it. And it has things. Here's another one called The Covered Bridge. And you can find sometimes copies of these on eBay, these vintage magazines. They actually has also nonfiction. Here's one all about wild animals. And we have a lot of advertisements. There's some projects, how to do things. So they're really kind of neat, and it's just so hard to find an antiquarian magazine or vintage magazine that's in good shape. A lot of advertisements in the back. It's really interesting. You can go in here and see advertising for products that exist today that we use every day that you didn't even know existed in that time. So it's actually kind of fun to look at these. And these are kind of, if you could get a really good copy, not inexpensive, that's for sure. So I picked up this book actually at Barnes & Noble. It's Lights and Chimes and Mysterious Times. It's a new young adult, 8 to 12 category, about an orphan boy who steps through a doorway into a portal in London to a whole nother world. So it has sort of that escapism, alternate fantasy world like the Phantom Tollbooth, Peter Pan kind of a concept. Very mysterious, really neat writing, no pictures inside, just text. But actually, I take it back. I saw like there's maybe three black and white images. So it's all about kind of a smoky, dark, and dangerous alternative London. So kind of neat if you want to check that out. I found a box set of the Babysitter's Club. I actually had all of these books in the 80s when I was growing up. These are 4 books from the 80s in this vintage box set. Pretty good condition. Not so bad at all. There are 4 of them. Not the most brilliant reading or anything like that, but they were pretty good series books. And let me just show you one. It's really hard to... this is Jessie's Secret Language, and it's about the 4 girls who started the Babysitter's Club. And they're fairly good novels. I mean, I've been through a couple of them in my time. I read a couple for my children's literature project. So nothing to write home about, but neat to have in your collection. This is an absolutely fabulous book, The Golden Book of Fairy Tales. This is supposedly the best artistic book of fairy tales that you can buy, although it's out of print. I got a used copy of it from Amazon second place or secondhand seller stores. It is absolutely beautiful, and I actually got this 2 months ago, and I don't think I've shared it yet. If you look at the inside, it has some really lovely design. Some very typical fairy tales, some that I've never heard of. Just look at this book. So whether you like fairy tales for yourself or your children, I did read Cinderella is in here, and it was edited. It didn't have the whole bloody and ending, so they're a little bit edited, should I say. Here's Little Red Riding Hood. So, lovely book, and actually this one had a torn cover, so I fixed it a little bit, but as good as I could do. So, I also picked up A Bridge to Terabithia, which I also read, and I'm going to do a review separately about this next. And I also picked up, this is Reggie's Ride with Santa by Noreen Baker, and in Austin, Texas. She was a resident, and this was a very limited series of a few the actual printings, the only series run of these printings that she did. She was a local resident, and I got this when I was actually visiting there. And it's just a cute little animal story, and several of the streets in that city, actually in San Antonio, are named after her, so I just thought that was kind of neat to have since I'd been there. And lastly, I picked up this, and it doesn't have a cover, so I was quite disappointed. This is Dr. Seuss's Your Favorite Seuss. It's so hard if you don't want to spend $40 or $50 for this book. I mean, this one was still $25, and it didn't even have a cover. But what it is it's many of Dr. Seuss's very famous works, but it also has a lot of essays at the beginning by scholarly authors and literature reviewers that analyze it. So here's an example of an essay right before Horton Hears a Who. So it talks a little bit about Seuss's writing style, hidden meaning inside of the stories, things like that. And here's what the table of contents looks like: stories and essays. So, for example, You're Never Too Old by Stan and Jan Bernstein, and then the coordinating story is Miguel Yacht's Pool. So, kind of neat to have, mostly because for my children's literature project I had to study a little bit of Dr. Seuss's work. So, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my Antiquarian Children's Annual video.